Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to July's Pro Power Hour. My name is Grant Chapman. I work in the advisor marketing team here at Intuit QuickBooks and I'm your host for today's session. It's great to have you all along joining us today, and before we begin I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation where I am in Sydney, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. In today's Pro Power Hour, we're going to look at some of the tools, tips and tricks in QuickBooks Online Accountant and QuickBooks Tax powered by LodgeiT that can save you a bit of time and effort while you're all knee-deep in returns. We're also going to take a look at some of the updates that have been made to LodgeiT to comply with obligations for this year's returns. First, a little bit about us though. I'm sure everyone on the call today is aware of Intuit's flagship product, QuickBooks Online, given that it's used by more than 300,000 accountants and bookkeepers and more than 5.1 million small businesses around the world. I hope that most of you are aware of the functionality in QuickBooks Online Accountant too that really helps smaller accounting and bookkeeping firms to manage their clients, to keep on top of their workflow, and to help with tracking their time and billing. On the compliance front, QuickBooks Tax powered by LodgeiT is an online tool that helps you manage tax and BAS preparation and lodgement needs. We've had hundreds of accounting and bookkeeping firms start using QuickBooks Tax over the last financial year. So if you haven't had a look, I'll tell you how you can get free access as part of the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program at the end of the session. Next slide, please. Okay, before we do get started, let me take you through some very quick housekeeping. So today's session is being recorded, so we'll provide a copy of the recording to everyone by email. Watch out in your inbox for a copy of that email, and that recording will let you review any of the content shared today or to share it with your other team members. We will have a Q&A section at the end, so please add any questions that you have for our presenters into the Slido chat box in the bottom of your screen there. If you are having any technical difficulties with not being able to see or hear the presentation, we suggest you restart your device, you refresh your browser, or try a different device. You can also navigate to the troubleshooting guide located at the bottom of the page, which does contain a link to an alternate video browser. Again, you will receive a recording of the session, so while it's not as good as the live thing, at least you won't miss a thing. When it gets to demo time, to see the screen better, we recommend you maximize the screen by clicking on the expand icon, but please note it does take a couple of moments for the screen to render, so if it appears a little blurry at first, just give it a moment to clear up. Now that the housekeeping's out of the way, let's move on to today's session. So today you're going to hear from Tish Bagwandeen. Tish has more than 12 years of financial experience and has a really in-depth understanding of business, from managing and growing startup enterprises to taking care of the daily financial requirements of companies. As a chartered accountant, Tish has a global experience that spans a variety of industries, having previously worked in the United States as well as South Africa. After working as a financial auditor, she transitioned her career towards that of a group financial controller in the financial services sector. After successfully transitioning the company to sale on the ASX, she's co-founded In Finance Solutions. So Tish is really all about the numbers and really loves working with people and small companies to help them achieve their business goals. You're also going to hear from Andrew Noble. Andrew has more than 20 years experience in public practice accounting, but his real passion is finding more efficient ways to handle workflows in an accounting firm. Andrew also built LodgeiT, which is the solution that powers QuickBooks Tax. LodgeIT's a web-based platform that facilitates digital interactions with government agencies, including the Australian Taxation Office, the State Revenue Offices, and the Australian Securities and Investment Commission. Okay, I'll be back at the end of the session for our Q&A too, but for now, I'm going to hand over to Tish and Andrew.
Thanks for that introduction, Grant. Every time I hear that number, more than 12 years, I start feeling a little bit old. Maybe I need to revise it a little bit. So today is prep for taxes, and we really are looking at the key features within the functionality in the software. I'd like to impress that this is really, I guess, my tips and tricks from using the software and prep for taxes within QuickBooks. So by no means is it meant to be a comprehensive training session. And I would suggest that as you start using the software, you will also start to find your own little tips and tricks that you can make note of. Now, if we look at an overview of what prep for taxes really is, for me, it's there to simplify my year-end process, saves me time, it's leaving a really nice audit trail, and it makes communication easy. Next slide, please. So the first thing is, how do you actually use it? So Prep for Taxes has been around for maybe, I think, around 6 months or a little bit longer. And the way in which you access it is through the Accountant's Toolbox. Now, I've been running some training sessions since May on this, and one of the most frequent questions that I get is, who has visibility on this? So in the prep for taxes, it's important to note that the only people that have visibility to this is the bookkeeper or the accountant. So this is sort of restricted away from the client, which is really nice because it helps to separate your internal working papers from what the client can see. A really nice functionality in this is it allows you to actually toggle between year ends. So we all know we have that client that comes in and they have 2 or 3 years of tax returns outstanding. If their data is already existing on QuickBooks, it's simply a matter of just toggling between the tax year ends, and you can go for up to 6 year ends on the system. So this one's really nice because you find you don't have to update everything manually and then just work in the current year within QuickBooks. The other thing that's really nice is swapping between the basis of accounting. And we do have those clients that are a bit smaller that predominantly use the cash method of accounting, or sometimes they have a little bit of a mishmash between accrual and cash. But when it comes to the taxation view, we really want one view of accounting. And so here you're actually allowed to toggle between the accrual basis and cash basis. And toggling between this view does not change the overall settings within your file. So if you go back into the accounting report and you want to get the accrual view on your debtors or your balance sheet, for example, you still have that view that's available to you. So moving on to the next slide. So one of the things is we said that it's there to really standardize your processes, monitor progress, and link your documents. And this for me is really key because if you're working across a team, you really want to be able to say, this is my tax year end process that everyone should follow. And if you don't have that documented in some central point, then it's really easy for things to start slipping through the gaps. So looking at the next slide, we have a screenshot of what the year-end tasks actually look like. Now, QuickBooks has built in a standardized year-end process, but by no means does it mean that you are restricted to following this process. You have a little add button at the bottom, and this is going to allow you to add in additional steps to tailor to your firm's processes. If you are one of the larger firms and you have a bit more of a comprehensive checklist and you don't want to spend time going in and adding all those steps individually into your file, a little handy trick is if you have the checklist sitting somewhere on SharePoint, OneDrive, or in a Dropbox, you can actually just link it into that document. So if you look at where the red box is highlighted, you simply can go in and copy and paste a link and save that to your process. And that can link back to a more comprehensive checklist instead of adding another 5 or 6 steps into your year-end tasks within QuickBooks. The one thing that we touched on is that it's very easy for you to get a status update in terms of where the work is. And if you look at the column on the right-hand side, you can see that there's various statuses that are attached to each task. So you have 3 that you can pick from. One is the to-do, the waiting, or the done. So if I want to know where a file is at, I just log in to my prep for taxes, I look in at my year-end tasks, and I get a really quick snapshot of how far has the team progressed. And also it gives me an idea of where are the bottlenecks sitting. Is it a case of me waiting for supporting documentation? Is there a reliance of a third party that it's then going to trigger a follow-up? So this is really nice for all those reasons I just spoke about. Moving on to the next slide. Review and adjust is, I think, really where the core of the work is done from a tax perspective. And I think having spent some time, well, a lot of time in audit and then switching over to the accounting side, I think one of the biggest failings that sometimes web accountants have is we don't keep all our year-end adjustments in one central point. So looking at the next slide, again, that's a screenshot of what you will be seeing in your prep for taxes. So you will note that firstly, you have your previous year and your current year side by side. So this one's allowing you to do a really quick comparison on your balances to understand where your large movements are. As we saw in the initial screen, you could toggle between various year ends and accounting methods. Here you can toggle between various views. So you can either choose to see something at a trial balance view, or you can choose to see it at a financial statement line item view. And my little tip here is choose the financial statement line item view, because when you're looking at prior year to current year and you're looking at those large fluctuations, you actually don't need it at an account basis level. You actually need it on line item level. And that's just going to help you hone in on what category you should be looking at. You have the adjusting entries column. And one of the things here is once you post an adjusting journal entry, and I do advise posting the adjusting journal entry from this screen, because what actually happens is it collates the journals for approval before it actually processes it against a balance. And from a review perspective, this becomes really handy. If you want to know what adjustments were posted against what account, it's really easy for you to pick it up from this column. You will notice that on the left-hand side, we have little green ticks next to balances. So this can be used really in two ways. One, it can be used by the preparer to tick off the balances to say they've actually reviewed the work, they've attached a working paper. Or it can be used by you as a reviewer to indicate, well, I've ticked this off, it now has a green tick next to it, so it's been through its review process. And what this serves to do is really isolating responsibility, and it's also serving as an evidence of review at the same time. So you don't need to create another working paper out of this to evidence your review. It can all happen centrally within your file. If you look at the make adjustments at the on the right-hand side, this is where you'll process your adjusting journal entries from. And when you get pushed into your screen, another reason why you want to use it from this screen as opposed to going through your journal entry, your manual journal entries, is because it'll automatically default to the year end that you're working in. I don't know about you, but sometimes I very often forget to change the date on my journal entry. I post it, and then I have to figure out, oh yeah, I need to go back and adjust it. This really just cuts that out for you because you don't have to remember to change that date. It's doing it all for you in one process. And so an additional step out of this is that the journal entry is actually collated into a separate adjusting report. So if you want to send out that report maybe to a bookkeeper, if you're not the bookkeeper in the file, and you're just working at an accounting level, you can send out those adjusting journal entries for their information. So really you're giving yourself that visibility and transparency to say, well, I started at a balance of $2,000, I ended up with a different balance, what were the adjusting journal entries that went on in between, and it's really just communicating easily for you. At the top, you actually have the tool section, and you'll notice that there's a button that says download to zip. If you have a protocol within your firm where you want to back things up outside of QuickBooks, you can download your file to a zip file, and you can back that up on your OneDrive or in your cloud drive, wherever that information actually sits. So moving on to the next screen. There are two additional functionalities that are built in, and that's grouping and statements and documents. Grouping and statements, although it is part of the prep for taxes, it's leaning more into the financial statement view of your accounts. And what I really like about this is it lets you organize your financial statements or your accounts in the way that you want to view it. You're able to easily attach documents into your file, and those documents actually get collated under a separate tab called Documents, and that's really where it links into our audit trail. So looking at the next screen, this is a screenshot of what you will see under grouping and statements. Now, the default view for this is for it to come through in the same way that you have your accounts mapped in under your chart of accounts within your file. And I'm sure most people have this experience where something is mapped into a current liability, but it actually moves into a debit balance, and you want it to show up in your current asset section. And this is where you can just easily drag and drop balances into a category that's more suited to that account. An additional functionality that's built in here is you can actually add your own groupings. So this is where you want to start thinking about, what do I want my financial statements to look like overall? And how do I want to present this view either to my client or to a third party? And I think here it's important to think about what that overall objective of financial statements are. So if we take it one step back, our objective is always to present financial statements that can be understood by that third party. And so with that in mind, this is where you want to start thinking about your groupings. And then you have the ability to add new groupings into your accounts. So when you export it out of Excel, it actually is giving you a view that you can understand, you can make sense of the numbers. As accountants, yes, it is going to make sense to us, especially if we're the people who did the bookkeeping in the background. But think about it really from a usability perspective from your clients or bankers or whoever that third party actually is. You will notice that as you drop through notes within your financial statements or within your prep for taxes file, you have visibility on whether there's a note or an attachment next to a balance. So again, this comes in handy when you're reviewing your documents. If there's a note there, you can always quickly just click on the icon, read the note. Or if there's an attachment, it actually shows up the little paper clip, and that's where you can actually view the additional working paper, or even if it's a case of it's just been a supporting document like your bank statement, etc., you know that it's attached to your file. Now, this one's really good when you have a different bookkeeper and a different accountant working in the file. We all know we hate those dreaded emails of, can you please send us a bank statement, or can you send us this additional supporting information? Here, once the bookkeeper or the junior accountant has reviewed the file and put all the attachments in, it's really just up to you from a tax perspective or a prep for tax perspective to review that. One of the nice things that I like about this is functionality that you use probably once a year because taxes are annual. And if you don't use something, you could actually just forget what are the key tips and tricks. And you'll notice on the top right-hand corner, there's the little take a tour button. And if you clicked that within your file, it actually gives you screen prompts and then how to start using the system. So if you ever needed a refresher and you don't want to spend time online watching the videos that are available in online resources, you can always click the take a tour button and that can prompt you through the screen. Now, looking at the next screen, once you've finalized your file within QuickBooks, it then has a built-in button to LodgeiT, which then exports out into your accounting software. And the next few slides are just really some of the key items that I've picked out from the tax software that as an accountant makes it a little bit easier for me to use. And it's really focusing, for me personally, those little admin tasks that I don't like doing, those 5 minutes that accumulate throughout the day, and suddenly I've lost 2 hours of my time. This is items that are actually automating that for me. So one of the key things for me in the LodgeiT software is the outcome of assessment. And you can actually find this within the settings in your file. And what you can do is you can automatically send the outcome of assessment to your clients once you've ticked this functionality. I don't know about you guys, but I very often get calls from clients, oh, I didn't receive my outcome of assessment, or I don't know where it is. Can you help me find it? And again, it's about me wanting to give that service delivery and then stopping what I'm doing, sending out those documents, or trying to engage my admin person to do it. Having this sent out automatically from your client means it's electronically stored in their emails. So it's just a matter of them saving it, and you can actually give them those instructions so they know where to find their information. So looking at the next slide from there, the other thing that I really enjoy about the tax software is the dashboard. In particular, when it's year end, I've got a whole lot of VAT returns and tax returns that I need to do. And every team is organized into their own area. And instead of viewing all the documents that are going to be due, I actually have a number of options that I can filter through. So the one that I have up on screen is showing you that you have the ability to filter through activity statements, individual income tax returns, company tax returns, etc. So really, every return that's applicable to your client that you need to lodge, you have the ability to filter that through. And what I like about this is it's really just giving me that a specific view that's relevant to me or that particular team member at the time. You will notice that that's not the only field that you can filter by. You can filter by due dates or periods or lodgements. And at the top, you have a nice little dashboard telling you how many returns that are actually overdue. And for me, this is really key because it gives me the ability to monitor this really easily. I can log in maybe once a week and see what is overdue, what's coming up for overdue, and what do I really need to action from there on. So it's helping me keep track of my own personal compliance. On the next slide. So the tax software allows you to send out e-signature requests. Again, really, really handy because it's tracking everything electronically. And what's actually happening is it's also logging it for you in terms of an audit trail. So you can actually see the time frame that was attached to a particular tax return or any return really, and that time frame from the point of finalizing and sending out to receiving a signature and lodging. And again, it's really isolating responsibility. So if you ever have to get reviewed from a risk perspective to say, you know, are all signatures being collated in the way that they are clients signing off before you're lodging, it's all logging this time frame for you automatically. There is a two-factor authentication that's built in the system for clients. And again, this is really hitting on that security risk. So you know that the person who's signing off on that return is actually authorized to do so. And the two-factor authentication really happens in one of two ways. It either can be linked to a date of birth or it can be linked to a mobile where the client will get a code. They'll have to input that and then they'll be able to sign it. Something else that really helps me cut down on my admin is automatic reminders. I know I have a fair few of those clients. Everyone's busy running their businesses. You send them something out to sign. 3 or 4 days later, it's not coming back to you. But when you have an automatic reminder built in, it's really just taking care of that admin task for you without you having to do that manual follow-up. So that's my tips and tricks on prep for taxes. And as I said, this is by no means meant to be comprehensive. It's really about you getting to know the software, using it, and you'll find through using it, you'll probably develop your own list of tips and tricks that you can share internally within your firm. So from there on, I think I'll hand it back to Grant.
Thanks, Tish. That was fantastic. Let's move on to the session from Andrew, who's going to talk about some of the benefits of QuickBooks Tax powered by LodgeiT and some of the upcoming changes, or the current changes, really, to help people with this year's returns. Andrew, let's hand over to you. Thanks.
Good stuff. Thanks, Grant. And thanks, Tish, for covering off on that. It's really great to see people finding time-saving methods in LodgeiT. Today, I really want to touch on some of our LodgeiT features that that you can be using to improve your time savings even further. These are some of the new features we put in there. Also want to touch off on the business models that you might be using with your accounting and bookkeeping practices, because I think that as we're bringing technology into this space in a whole new way, it's really important to consider how you interact and operate with your clients. So I'll touch on that. And I'm going to be using a demonstration of a company tax return. And in that demonstration, I'll show you some of those new features that we've put in there. So I'll head over to the next slide. So this is really about asking yourselves, you know, are you compliance focused or client focused? You know, I've come out of that world where accounting firms over time, I believe they become very compliance focused. They wait pretty much for the year end to come along, and then the clients come across with year end information, and the accounting practice is quite passive. Information is collected. Maybe the partner dedicates the work to someone, and more often than not these days, we've got outsourced workers that are helping with this task. So that compliance work's handed across to someone. At this stage, not a lot of thought has been put into who's managing that data file. You know, is that person who's using the data file well trained? If it's the client, have they had training, that sort of thing? For that kind of practice, what then happens is there's a lot of extra work that goes into the year-end compliance process, and as a result, timesheets are used, time is used to track that activity, and finally, what comes out at the end is quite a complex, difficult process. So then, really, we're moving into this world where I think it's a whole lot better and more valuable to think about actually working on the client data file through the year, and also having the client work with you on that data file, if it's the client or if it's their bookkeeper, giving them the hand that they need through the year. And as a result of that, I believe that at the end of the year, when it comes time to do compliance, it's a whole lot easier to get the work through, and LodgeiT will perform a whole lot better with that kind of work. So we'll jump on to the next slide. So the best way to get that kind of year-end process working nice and seamlessly is with systems and controls. And certainly Tish touched on that, pointed out that you want to have your systems and controls across the firm. And obviously, if you're going to be adopting systems and controls for your firm, it's great if you can help your clients implement those systems and controls as well. And obviously, the best control that I'm aware of is actually technology, but technology that's used appropriately. So I love the analogy of the McDonald's way, and you could imagine McDonald's franchise, where when it comes time to have patties delivered into the operation, they don't just take patties from anyone. Those patties would be coming in a very specific way at a specific temperature, and they would be delivered on time when everyone's agreed it's time to do the delivery. So that, that McDonald's way is certainly something that we can adopt in our firms to help us improve our compliance when it comes time to get around to doing the compliance. So love the McDonald's way analogy, and it's great for us in our practices. So let's head over to the next slide. So what are these controls that I believe can really help us with our day-to-day operations in practice? And I think the first one is really helping our clients get their tech right. So, either it's us as the accountants and bookkeepers who take over that role and do it, front to end, or if we've got our if we've got our clients looking after it, then at least let's give them the necessary training and take the time and the effort to train them, or if you have to train their in-house bookkeeper, do that. That's definitely probably the key to getting good quality accounting data through to LodgeiT. Otherwise, really, it's a story of junk in, junk out, and really that's what you want to avoid, all that unnecessary rework. Really great to start with your opening balances, making sure those are accurate, especially if you're bringing on a file from some other accountant. It's not always guaranteed that the opening balances will be accurate. So you can't really do year end unless you know that your data in the file is comprehensive and accurate through the year, but also the starting balances should be accurate. So, working there as a starting point. Definitely inside of all of these applications, QuickBooks, Xero, MyHub, and if you're anything like me, you've got clients who are using all these different applications. All of them do have a method to lock the data file, and I think QuickBooks has probably got one of the better methods. In MyHub, it's a little bit more clunky. So certainly lock the data file when the year-end process has been completed, and that'll ensure that those opening balances don't get messed up. Looking through that chart of accounts, retiring out old accounts, and this is all as part of that, I guess, coordination with the client's bookkeeper, making sure that there's no unnecessary accounts in there, because otherwise transactions tend to go in places that you wouldn't have wanted them to go. The naming conventions on those accounts can be quite useful, especially when you're importing transaction data or the line item data into LodgeiT. If you can see the line item data, then it's a whole lot more easy to classify the line item against our classification tool. And I'm going to show that to you in a moment for those of you who might not be familiar with the LodgeiT system. There can be different technical approaches, so it's always great to adopt a single technical approach and make sure everyone in the firm is using that single technical approach. So inside of LodgeiT, for instance, we've got 2 different ways of handling trust financial reporting, and you need to really adopt one of those ways across your whole firm. Then obviously you've got balance checks to carry out, and obviously Tish has showed you some useful tools directly inside of the QuickBooks software application, which you can use to carry out your year-end checks. And definitely, I would suggest, we're using screen sharing technology now, and there's a lot of free screen sharing technology that's out there that you can use. So there's Skype, and there's even Zoom you can use, and that screen sharing technology is actually free a lot of the time, especially the Skype screen sharing software applications. So let's head over to our next slide. Now, in terms of delivering that value to the clients, this is definitely not something that's just a sort of a once-off year-end activity. It's really, I believe, about helping them manage their tech stack and helping them choose the right technology for their business, providing them with the necessary training to get the most out of the technology that they're using, and when appropriate, looking and finding new technologies that might actually help them with their businesses, and at the same time thinking about new technology for your practice as well. Obviously, there's opportunities for finding tax savings for a lot of clients, saving money in terms of finding the right technologies and the right approaches. Implementing controls. So we've talked about controls here, but definitely giving clients the opportunity to implement controls for their own businesses will definitely help them streamline their operations as well. And all of this is going to give you the opportunity to generate good quality accounting data for your clients, which they can use for bank loans, and obviously ensuring they don't get unnecessary audits from the tax office. So, in terms of this kind of business model, I just don't see this as a kind of business model where you can have a sort of a once a year interaction with the client. This is an all year kind of interaction with the client, multiple touch points, hopefully doing the BASs and stuff for the client as well. And that really brings to the forefront the opportunity to provide a fee for service where it's wrapped services, a single fee, and just divide that fee out over 12 periods, and you've got yourself a monthly payment from the client. I think definitely that's the way to take compliance into the future. So let's head over to the next slide, and now we can sort of jump into what we've got inside of LodgeiT for the new year. Tish actually touched on automated notices of assessment. So I'm not going to go through this in any great detail, but you can see we've got some screens there where you can toggle and you can actually compare notice of assessment values with estimated values, which is useful. We'll head over to the next slide. And in this year's iteration of LodgeiT in the individual tax return, we do have ATO benchmarking. So if you have a look at the screen now, you'll see that now you've got the opportunity to compare. Well, actually, it's a warning message that's popped up by the ATO based on what you might have inside of LodgeiT for a deduction, for instance, and it actually works in other areas as well, like rental properties. So what you'll get is you'll get a warning if you're trying to take a deduction that's greater than the average for that industry group, or in this case, occupation group. So I think that's really useful and keep you out of hot water. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't claim above the average, and there might well be times when you do need to claim above the average because the client does have those deductions, but certainly it'll allow you to see where you stand with regard, I guess, to the average for, in this example, your occupation group. So let me now jump into actually sharing my screen, and we'll jump through a couple of changes and things in the system. Right, okay, so I'm inside of LodgeiT now. Let's move this out of the way so that's not in the way, and I believe you can all see my screen. Now, in terms of form changes, I've got to say that for the new year, there's not a huge amount in the way of form changes, and it's probably not worth me going through form changes. What I'm rather going to do is I'm going to go through and actually show you some things in terms of year-end processes for a business that might make life easier for you, especially if you're using LodgeiT. One thing you'll note is that I didn't import from Excel. And in this case, the reason that I've done that is simply because it was a simple case of putting together some example data for a balance sheet and a profit and loss on Excel. Now, I wouldn't advise using this in the real world. In the real world, you definitely want to have a data file for your clients. And it still amazes me to this day that, you know, with such cost-effective data files available from the likes of QuickBooks, people persist in using manual methods. It's a horrible way to go. And really, you know, if there's bank feeds in the mix, you've got a huge opportunity to save time. So just know that the Excel is only here because I'm using it to have a single set of balances. There's no GL behind it. It's simply so you can see what I'm doing with some of the tools that we've got in the system. So in this case, we've got a profit and loss and balance sheet. Typically, you would have imported this from QuickBooks, and you obviously would have the opportunity to have QuickBooks open on the other screen. You can do your adjusting entries on QuickBooks. For this year, you'll notice we don't have cash flow boost. We don't have JobKeeper. Those fell away in the 2021 year. You might have some of these new state-based grants, and you know you'd have the opportunity to classify those inside of LodgeiT. In terms of the depreciation methods, when it comes time to accounting for depreciation, either you're going to use a full accounting-based depreciation method, prime cost diminishing value, or, you know, for a lot of our smaller clients, sometimes it's just simplest, cheapest, and easiest to use whatever the tax office is providing. And certainly, I think the method that is most appropriate now is probably your temporary full expensing, a very easy way to get that full expense through. And it's worth going through those changes to the tax depreciation rules in a little bit of detail because there has been a lot of changes over the years, but certainly temporary full expensing seems to be the way to go. So once you've got your accounting data inside, then it's a case of doing your mapping. You will notice inside of LodgeiT that you've got the opportunity to link your cost and your accumulated depreciation. You'll also notice inside of the revenues and expenses categories where you're doing your mapping that you can tag non-assessable. So you've got this opportunity to put in tax tags, which will save time in the tax form. And the same with your expenses. You've got the opportunity to drop in some tags. In this case, there are tags that you'll probably never ever use, but they're all there. And probably the most commonly used tags will be your non-deductible and maybe your primary production tags. So once you've got your tags inside and everything is classified, always check your classifications because LodgeiT does have a machine learning algorithm that handles the classifications for you. It may not necessarily always be accurate. So you do need to just double check that the classifications have been handled appropriately. Now, there are some tools that we've put in for the new year that will help you with your they'll help you with your classification, not your classification, but with your GST analysis. So let's have a look at this. So we've got GST coming in from these are your BASs that are coming in from obviously that you've prepared and lodged with the ATO. Based on now, you can actually pull that data straight through and populate straight from QuickBooks. But in this case, what we're doing is we're comparing off what's in QuickBooks with what's been sent to the ATO. You'll notice that we don't have any data in there at the moment. And if we had a look at our totals, we've got a variance. But now what we now have is the opportunity to do an import. And what we're doing is we're importing the data for comparison purposes, so we can see what's inside of QuickBooks compared to what's inside of what's come through from the BAS. So you can see now, this is great because what I can see is per the accounts or per QuickBooks in this case, I've only got pretty much zero difference across my 4 BASs, right? There is obviously this difference for capital purchases and non-capital purchases because those are not getting reported in the BAS anymore. But for the rest of the BAS, that's looking great. And then I've got the same in terms of the payroll. So exactly the same. When I press that button, the payroll values have come through and I've got the opportunity to compare off across the two there. So I'm comparing what's in the activity statements from the point of view of W1, W2, and what is in the payroll software inside of QuickBooks. And again, I've got no variance. So that, you know, those are just some of those checkpoints that you can use for year end. Now I'll just show you something else that we have put in here, which is useful, and that is your integrated account. So now I do only have a 2021 data set in here at the moment, but it'll give you the idea of what's happening. So we've got our integrated account that we've imported. Currently, this is a CSV import, but fear not, over the next few months, this is something that we'll put into the system, is that you can import your integrated accounts dynamically from the ATO, and you won't have to import the CSV. So what we might want to do with this, you know, this long list of transactions is look for the interest, and we can find all those interest transactions because we know we're going to have to put a journal inside of our accounting software, and we need to know what that total interest will be. So don't forget, ATO will often do these sort of adjustments. They'll put remissions in and they'll put extra interest charges and all kinds of things go through interest. We can certainly do a search across the top of that, and then we've got a total for our interest. So instead of having to export the CSV and manually do calculations across the top of this, you've now got these filters inside of LodgeiT that can certainly help you with these calculations. So let's go back to that client, which is the one that I've just carried out I've carried out the classification. So I've been in here, I imported my balance sheet and profit and loss. Again, this is the reason why you want to take that sort of annual approach to working with your client, because I can tell you that when it comes around to just doing the import, you're going to have a whole lot less in terms of adjusting entries to have to worry about. Now, what I have done inside of here is I have actually used some of these tools. So we do have a hire purchase calculator. In this case, I've calculated out HP interest across the timeframes. I've got HP summary, and in this case, we're using that approach where we're breaking out HPs between current and non-current, and also between the unrepaid and the unexpired interest components. Now, inside of here, there is also obviously borrowing cost calculators that you could use. And all of these things you can use to derive your working papers. Now, obviously, you could use Tish's method and attach those inside of books to taxes, inside of QuickBooks. Or if you've got other data files that you're working with, like, for instance, a Xero file or a MYOB file, we certainly have working papers inside of LodgeiT, and you can use the LodgeiT working papers. And I guess in the long run, what we'll be looking to do is making it so that if you use those QuickBooks books to tax working papers, we'll actually make sure we get some ticks coming through here so that you don't have to retick anything, and you can just work on the basis that check has been carried out inside of QuickBooks, if that's an easier, more seamless experience for you if you're using the QuickBooks software. So certainly the checks that I like to carry out would certainly be across any new assets. In this case, let's have a look. You can see here, I've taken that, I've taken that simplified approach, just simply using my temporary full expensing, even in the accounts. And the way that I'm doing that is I'm still recording the asset values on the balance sheet. So I've got my asset less accumulated, and I'll show you why, because if we go into our special purpose reports, and this is actually a new feature that we've got here as well, is our new special purpose reports for the year. Let me just change the name on my report because they're no longer special purpose. Tish reminded me of that. So let's just create my special purpose in here. This would obviously work for all of those all of those downstream accounting software applications that you might have to work with through the year. So let's have a look inside of here and see what that statement of financial position would look like. We've now got a lot of editing capability inside of here. And you could see inside of here, these obviously have come through from Excel. And we've got my general pool, which I'd open up. We've still got our full cost and the full accumulated. And the reason that we've got that is so that, you know, if someone's looking at the balance sheet, they can at least see what the full cost is, even if you've got an accelerated depreciation running through the whole system. So back to the working papers, I just wanted to show you that in terms of the cost and the accumulated. Certainly putting in working papers there for your trade debtors, your bank, and then down into the tax parts. You can see here working papers for our tax balance. So here we've got 398.25. Let's generate the form and see if we can pull that out as a balance. So we're going to pull our company tax return together very quickly. We've got interest and depreciation in there. And certainly what I would want to do is I would just want to make sure that I put in my installments. One of the things you'll notice with LodgeiT is that with companies, the tax installments would normally populate in here dynamically and automatically. But I'm just going to put these in now. And there's 3 quarters, and I would normally just put the quarterly names there. So what we would be finally wanting with this is we would be wanting our tax calcs to come through and work accordingly. Let me just come back and see here. Forms, but certainly what we would be doing is making sure that our balances will be matching. And what we would come through and do is make sure that our final balances match up. Our final tax balance matches up. We've got our installment in. We end up with a final tax installment per our tax return. So we would want to find that we've got a June quarterly installment outstanding. We've got a final balance per our tax return. We've got our PAYGW, which would be per that 4th quarter BAS. And you can see here, I've just made an attachment, which is our payroll analyzer, but you could also have that coming off the BAS. And then we've got our GST payable balance in here. So you can see I haven't got one here at the moment, but if I bring that in, I've got a reconciliation now. That reconciliation, if I have a look at what that reconciliation is, 4662, that reconciliation is what I would expect for my GST on the balance sheet. And the GST balance sheet balance, because this is on a cash basis and my accounts are on an accrual basis, the difference is going to be what I pull out of any debtors and creditors. So that debtors and creditors there, I've actually printed off the wrong report there. But what you should find is that you end up with your final balance there per your reconciliation. Let me just quickly pull that back up for you, because I did just have that. I just have that reconciliation here, and that the way that you're pulling that up is you're selecting June, and then what you're seeing here is you're seeing your GST on your sales, your GST on your purchases, any GST on your debtors and creditors, which is obviously not brought to account on the BAS, but is certainly brought to account in the accounts, and therefore you'd be expecting to find your final 4858 balance. So let's just go back to the final set of balances that we're looking for. For our hire purchases, we'd be looking to find our hire purchase balances, and those hire purchase balances we'd be seeing in the financial statements. And you can see down here how those hire purchase balances are reflecting inside of both the current liabilities and the non-current liabilities, so split across the two. Now, certainly inside of LodgeiT now with our reports, you do have the ability to jump in here and make changes. So you might want to make changes with respect to bringing or removing those indents, rolling certain facts up into a single line, and then maybe moving and removing some of these totals. So I would ungroup my grants, I would ungroup my investment revenue, just to make it simpler and easier on the client. And so we've now got our other income, and it just becomes easier to look at. We might roll up our depreciation because the client doesn't need to worry about what kind of depreciation method we're using. We do have human resource as a group when you're doing a classification inside a LodgeiT. I believe it's useful to be able to see the total of your human resource costs, but certainly when it comes to reporting, if you don't like that method, you can ungroup, and you could come here to your other indirect costs and ungroup those as well. And then what you've got is you've got a report that when you generate it and export it and send it to your clients for signing, because that same methodology that you use for sending your tax forms to your clients for signing, you can reuse that method for your financial statements inside of LodgeiT. So you've got your own logos, you've got your own colors, all customized for yourselves and your practices. I believe that when it comes to selling your services in the marketplace, you really want to stand out and build your own brand. So it's picking up the name of the director. And if we have a look through here, you can see that's just a nice, simple profit and loss report now. So that was definitely something that our users were looking for, is a way for us to provide flexibility over how you design your reports. And certainly that's just some of the functionality that we've got in there from a report description point of view. In terms of where we're going with the product, when it comes to our financial reporting, we do plan to go down the route of introducing AASB 1060 the full standard. So that will allow you to take your financial reports to a whole nother level. And certainly I'm just demonstrating here that a lot of work has been done on the AASB 1060 standard, both with respect to generating machine readable reports and human readable reports. So these are your main reports that you will find in there. Statement of financial position, statement of profit and loss, statement of other comprehensive income, statement of change in equity, and statement of cash flow. So those are the sort of base reports that will be in there. And then we will go through and we will reconsider our structure and the way that you map inside of LodgeiT, so that it will align with your full AASB standard in this case. So that's pretty much where we're at, where we're going with the product. And probably what I can do now is flip it back to Grant. So thanks everyone for checking out where we're at.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Andrew. And thank you, Tish, for your presentation as well. So following on from what you're both saying, I guess with tax and BAS deadlines really pressing, it's really important to look at the heart of your accounting and bookkeeping solution and make sure that you are using the smartest tools available. So QuickBooks Online Accountant can help you work more efficiently to run your practice, helping you manage those workflows and track your jobs, invoice your clients, and a whole lot more. QuickBooks Online Accountant is free to use, and when you sign up, you automatically become a member of the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program, which provides you with free access to QuickBooks Tax powered by LodgeiT to really help you power through those tax and BAS lodgements. And what's more, with the Convert and Grow offer that we're currently running, you can actually bring your clients' books over to QuickBooks and we'll convert your data free. All you need to do is purchase 10 subscriptions and you'll receive 10 conversions. If you purchase 20, you'll receive 20 conversions, 30 and 30 and so on. This offer, though, does end on the 29th of July, so make sure that you jump on it. you can visit intuit.me/convert. It's the little URL at the bottom there, but we'll send you more information on all the tools that we've talked about today, as well as this offer following the webinar. So if you jump onto the next slide for me, team. If you are looking to bring some more of your clients to QuickBooks, now's a really great time to do it, as there is a price increase coming for our Simple Start and Plus subscriptions on the 29th of July. So importantly though, this price increase only affects new subscriptions. Any of your existing subscriptions will remain unchanged. So the bottom line really is that the retail price of the new Simple Start and Plus subscriptions is going to increase by $3 each. For a wholesale price, that means an increase of only $1.50 each. And again, this is only for new files purchased after the 29th of July. So now is a really great time to buy if you do need some new client files. The next slide, please. If you are looking at some firm ledger plans, they're changing on the 29th of July too, as well as our package subscriptions. So they're jumping up a little bit in price, and we are moving to one flat price for ledgers. So if you need files for your low trading entities, for your trusts, or the books where the client won't actually be accessing the file, you've got about 2 weeks to jump in and purchase those subscriptions before the price change on the 29th of July. So we have sent emails to your firm on these price increases. So please check your inbox, or as always, speak to your partner manager or call our team on 1-800-618-521 if you'd like to know a little bit more. Okay, that's it. We will jump into a quick Q&A. We've got a couple of minutes. If you do have any pertinent questions, jump into the Slido panel at the bottom of the screen there, but we'll jump into some questions now. So what have we got? Tish, one for you, I think, around grouping. Can you create different grouping types for different types of clients?
Definitely, yes. I think what's important to remember is that when you're looking at the grouping and statements within the Prep for Taxes functionality, it's very much applicable to that file that you're working in. So you can actually tailor it across clients to make those groupings more relevant.
Amazing. Thanks, Tish. Andrew, one for you that we had was looking at the BAS comparison work for BASs that have been lodged by someone else. So, for example, a bookkeeper or the client who is lodging their own BAS. Does the BAS comparison work?
Yeah, you can import BASs directly from the ATO regardless of who lodged the BASs.
Perfect. Another one for you, Andrew. I think I know the answer to this one, but the e-signatures you mentioned, do LodgeiT users receive unlimited e-signatures?
If you're coming through QuickBooks and you're getting the QuickBooks package, then yes.
Brilliant. Really great reason to join the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program and take up that offer. What else do we have? We have one for you, Tish, on what you were talking about with LodgeiT and the dashboard. You mentioned that it has that view of overdue returns. Can you filter those by the type of return as well?
Definitely. You just need to make sure that you are on the overdue tab, and then you filter that by type of statement.
Brilliant, thank you. We did have another one. I'm not sure if either of you know the answer to this one, but will outcomes of assessments send automatically if they don't match, or do they only send if they do match?
Only if they do match, and there's a routine to deal with the ones that don't match.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Andrew. I'll just give people one last chance. We're almost at time, but if you do have another question for Tish or Andrew, jump into the Slido panel in the bottom of your screen there. Otherwise, as always, you can reach out to our team and we'll be happy to help you with any queries afterwards. Again, you will be receiving a copy of this webinar today by email. So I know we covered a lot of ground. So if you do have questions about anything that you have seen, you can always reach out to our team after the webinar with any further questions that you have. But yeah, if you do have any questions while we're live on air now maybe your last chance.
There's one question I can see there, Grant, where people are asking whether you can import from QuickBooks in the way that I did for Excel. And yes, definitely. I mean, we've got very powerful QuickBooks import capability. And as I said, you definitely would want to be using a data file rather than Excel where clients have a business.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, we are at time. So with that, we'll wrap up. I would like to thank Tish and thank Andrew very much for all their work and their time presenting today, and to thank everyone else for joining the call. Thanks so much. We look forward to seeing you at another webinar very soon. Thank you.